Hi, hello, and welcome. Don't see Martha's camera.
You hear me, Michelle?
I can hear you and see you. I was just about to message our folks on the back end there. Hi, Martha.
Hi,
Good to see you.
Michelle.
Hello, and welcome, everybody. I hope everyone is keeping warm this season. My name is Michelle. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a communications advisor at BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, and will be one of the hosts today. I'm calling in from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, which you may know as Vancouver. My background is from North Vietnam, and my elders arrived in Canada as refugees just after the Vietnam War. I like to mention this because this personal history for me adds another layer of gratitude that my family and I were able to shelter and settle and start new roots here. I'd love to hear about where you're from, Martha. Would you like to introduce yourself? Oh no, Martha, I can't hear you. Let's see.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great.
Yes.
I think that was on the back end. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. And thank you, Michelle. Yes, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Martha Solomon, and I'm an education advisor at the office. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm an uninvited settler on the traditional unceded lands of the Tk'emlúps te Secwépemc within Secwépemc Ulu in the interior of British Columbia. My family on my mom's side has been in the BC interior since the late 1800s, though I just moved here about 10 years ago. And my dad immigrated to Canada in the 1960s from Cape Town.
Wow, I didn't know that. Thanks, Martha. Cape Town. It just seems like those before us came from so far and started new beginnings and hopes here. And I think that hope for better, that is always a good running theme, including in today's video launch.
Agreed.
So a bit about what we're doing here today. This event is all about launching the latest addition to a video series that we call I Love My Human Rights. Each video showcases a person in BC who shares their experiences and helps personalize complex human rights concepts and encourages empathy and action. We've already done 5 videos. Today will be the 6th, and they're all up on our website for you to watch. Before we start, I just want to briefly outline what everyone can expect today. So first, Martha is going to explain a little bit about the work our office does, and then we're going to have our very special guest introduce herself. Our guest today is Georgia Pike. She's the star of the latest I Love My Human Rights video and an advocate for accessibility and human rights. So she will introduce herself, talk a little bit more about her work, and then we'll have the BC Human Rights Commissioner, Kasari Govender, pop in for a few words. Then we'll all watch the video together, and then take some time to reflect and answer questions. The intent is to raise awareness through storytelling and strengthen connections between people across BC, because we all have complex experiences, but they may not always be shared and understood. At the end, we'll have some resources we want to point you to, including some that Martha and I created together, so watch out for those. You will also be asked to share your thoughts on the video launch today in a short evaluation, which will appear as a link at the end of our session today. So now I'll pass it over to Martha to share a little bit about our office.
Thanks, Michelle. British Columbia's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, which you'll hear Michelle and I also calling it BC OHRC, was created in 2019 after about 17 years without a human rights commission in our province. Our office exists to address the root causes of inequality, discrimination, and injustice in our province by shifting laws and policies, practices, and cultures. We do this work through education, including producing resources like the I Love My Human Rights video series that we're here for today, as well as research, advocacy, inquiry, and monitoring. I think it's worth mentioning at this point that our office is distinct from the BC Human Rights Tribunal, which hears complaints about discrimination and makes decisions. And we're also distinct from the BC Human Rights Clinic, which advises people who have experienced discrimination and may want to make a complaint. Together, our three offices form BC's human rights system, helping to prevent discrimination and address its root causes, and helping those who have experienced discrimination. I think it's really important to mention, too, that BC OHRC is an independent office of the BC Legislature, and that means that the Commissioner is nonpartisan and acts independently of government. We know that although all British Columbians have human rights that belong to them, not all British Columbians get to access and exercise those rights equally. Our I Love My Human Rights video series and today's launch session are just some of the ways that we hope to shift practices and culture in our province through education.
Thanks so much, Martha. As I said, the star of the video is here, Georgia Pike. Georgia, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do? Oh, 1 second, Georgia.
I think we might be having some
I think you're muted.
Some sound issues for our tech folks.
Do you want to try again, Georgia? No. 1 sec.
I think that there is in the background, our tech folks in the background might need to unmute Georgia on the back end there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Amazing.
Great.
I'm Georgia. I am joining you here from Victoria, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm an accessibility and inclusion specialist, and I really value advancing people's human rights and focusing on how we can make society a safer and more welcoming place for those who it may not be extremely accessible for. And I grew up in Kelowna, and I moved to Victoria for university. And shortly after, I lost my vision suddenly. So I had a stroke, and that wiped out my vision completely initially. And then over a bit of time, I was able to regain it slightly. So I have a small window of vision. And this really transformed my life in that I went into accessibility. So I knew right away that I wanted to get a guide dog. And with that, I trained really hard using a cane, a white cane. And then I was able to go and train with a guide dog. And it was a life-changing experience for me. And so I had this newfound sense of freedom where it was like, oh my gosh, this guide dog, it moves so fast. It takes me around things. It will correct my mistakes. And so I was really excited about it. And when I returned home with it, his name was Granger. I really ran into quite a few issues in terms of being able to access places, and that's where my advocacy started. I just knew that there was something amiss with a lack of education and a lack of understanding, and so I've made it my priority for about 10 years now, to help reduce barriers for people. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks so much, Georgia. Wow. I also hear that you're doing some cool work on that right now in terms of that in the world of accessibility. Is that right? Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm currently working at an organization called Can Assist, and we're based up at the University of Victoria. And Can Assist wears many different hats, including the project that I'm currently working on is to basically we get funding from the government and they say, hey, we need you to do different initiatives to reduce barriers in early childhood. So, right now, we're teaching leaders of childcare organizations how to be more inclusive and accessible so that little kidlets have the ability to access services just as anyone else.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks, Georgia. Such amazing work. And just before we launch, I want to let you know that I think we're having a little bit of difficulty getting the LinkedIn stream up and running, but we are smoothly running on our BCOHRC website and on YouTube. But we're working on getting the LinkedIn stream working as soon as we can. Before we launch our video, BC's Human Rights Commissioner, Kasari Govender, is going to join us to say a few words. Commissioner Govender, I will pass it over to you.
Great. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Martha. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you who are listening. Excuse me, I thought I'd give you a little bit of context on this series. Excuse me. After I was started, I was hired for this role, but before I actually started as commissioner and back in 2019, I was thinking through my priorities for this work, and we were starting this office from scratch. So I'm imagining what could we do, how can we contribute to human rights, and how can we use these new powers to create real change? And I thought of a number of advocacy priorities. And
sorry, just a note that we can still hear you, but your mic is a bit muffled and low. So
I don't know what to do about that. Maybe just give me 1 second and I'll see if I can
change the input.
Perfect.
Oh,
Better? Okay.
there you go. Yeah, you did
Great.
it.
Excellent. Sorry about that. As I was getting ready for the role, I was thinking about the advocacy priorities that we can take on, how we can change laws and policies. But I was really searching for an idea that would help us change hearts, that would really shift the dial on human rights in a more profound human way. I can say it that way. The kind of work that shifts the culture or society to open our eyes or to open our world to new ways of engagement. And so I wanted to do a video series that could help leverage the power of storytelling to build compassion, to build understanding across difference. So that's where this series originated, is in that kind of motivation to bring human rights work, again, kind of leveraging the power of storytelling to build compassion, to build understanding across difference. And in this case, what it evolved into was a way to tell stories of resistance and highlight the personal journeys and experiences of advocates. So again, really glad that you're all joining us for this, to those of us who are joining live, but also those who will be joining later and watching this recording once it's up on the web somewhere. I appreciate your openness to joining us in this learning journey. And most of all, I want to extend my gratitude to you, Georgia, for your activism, for your willingness to share your story, first of all with us, and then more broadly to the world. Georgia's insights, along with the support and feedback of other guide dog users who have really informed our work in this area, guided our work in this area, have taught us a lot about the experiences of guide dog users and the obstacles that stand in their way to full participation in public life. And we're hoping to pass that learning on to you as the audience here today and provide this forum for Georgia to share your leadership on accessibility. So thank you for this gift. And with that, I will pass it back, I think, to you, Michelle, and we'll move forward with the video.
Thanks.
Think
Thanks,
it's Martha.
Katari.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I think with that, we are ready to play the video now and hear Georgia's story. Here we go.
Every time that I walk into an establishment, I am unsure as to how I will be received. I could be halfway into my grocery shop when somebody comes up to me and says, "Is that a service dog?" And I'll say, "Yes." And they'll say, "Well, prove it."
You sit. Good girl.
My name is Georgia Pike, and I am a disability activist. When I was 19, I had a stroke that wiped out all of my vision. Nobody had any clue that a stroke was going to happen or could happen. It was terrifying. I knew as soon as I lost my vision that I wanted to get a guide dog. Guide dogs they're humans' eyes. They are highly, highly trained animals. In 2019, I had a medical appointment to attend in Vancouver. My dad and I went to go get breakfast at a nearby cafe. I was accompanied by my guide dog, and when we walked into the cafe, the manager said, "No pets allowed, take it outside."
After being repeatedly denied service, Georgia and her dad left the cafe.
It was devastating. It was so upsetting. I'm on guard every time I go outside, always preparing for somebody to say, "No, you're not allowed in here, get out." So it's very much a reality that I never would have known existed before I lost my vision. After the incident at the cafe, my dad submitted a human rights complaint on my behalf. The tribunal agreed that my human rights had been violated, and because of this, I was awarded $12,000 in compensation.
As of December 2024, the owner of the cafe has still not paid Georgia the amount he was ordered to.
I view myself as an advocate because I want to make people aware of the issues that guide dog users face.
Georgia has a Master of Arts in Critical Disability Studies from York University. She works with organizations to improve in-person and online accessibility.
I hope and I envision a future for blind and visually impaired people where they are free to use whatever tools they need to get around. Human rights, to me, is the concept that people can be who they are without facing barriers, and that they have the same access rights as the people around them.
This is my new favorite from the series. Georgia, you told multiple stories in there, from how you lost your vision to personal experiences of discrimination, including a big case going to the tribunal, to your hopes for the world. I thought that the layering of the stories was so impactful. If it's cool, I think we should do one takeaway each. Martha, what do you think?
Great idea, Michelle. I I think this is my new favorite as well. I love the whole series, but this one I just think is really remarkable. And I guess my main takeaway, Georgia, is your ability in the video to really share the toll that this kind of discrimination has on people who experience it. In the video, you talked about how you have to prepare yourself before leaving the house, to like prepare yourself for all these negative interactions with people who just feel entitled to question you about your disability or about your right to be in all of these really everyday kinds of places like grocery stores or cafes. And I think it's just so important that people understand, people who don't experience this kind of discrimination understand how pervasive it is, that it's not a one-off kind of experience. This is a daily experience sometimes. And I've heard Commissioner Govender describe this kind of systemic discrimination as being baked into our systems. And I feel like your story really showed that baked inness, and also the personal impact that it can have on one person, just going about their daily life and trying to grab a bite to eat or do your shopping. And I just think that's really important for people to know about. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's I think you really hit the nail on the head when you say it's pervasive, because uh, it's not even at the back of my mind. It's at the front of my mind. Every time I go into a store, it's like, okay, what's going to happen now? Am I going to be picked out? So I appreciate that comment.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. It's the mundane, everyday activities that able-bodied people can take for granted sometimes. So it's certainly very illuminating to hear. Thanks, Martha, for pointing that out, and Georgia for highlighting this. I think for myself, I want to focus on the dogs a little bit. I have a great appreciation for dogs. I have 2 of my own non-guide dogs who have no jobs at all. So in the video, when Georgia says guide dogs are their users' eyes, I think it's so important to remember that guide dogs are so highly trained, and they're doing such an important job at all times. And that skill and pressure that they carry, I really hope that is more recognized across businesses of all kinds. Separating the guide dog from its owner is not only discrimination, but actually further disabling to the owner. Yeah. Georgia, what's one message you want people to get from this video?
I think if there's one takeaway, I would say that it's important to educate yourself, and it's important to, when you're opening up a business, to really know the people that you could be serving, because guide dog users are all across BC, and we come in all shapes and sizes, and we have the same access rights as the person next to us who doesn't use a guide dog. And so to be respectful of those rights, and just to really take a step back and observe before taking action. Just sort of think, okay, that dog looks like it's working. It looks like it's helping out this person who's giving it commands. I'll leave them alone. So I think it's just a thing about taking a step back and thinking about the situation before you act.
I think that's such a great point, Georgia, and something that I try to do in my role as an education advisor at BCUHRC is to really get people to think not only about the rights that they hold and try and educate people about their rights, especially under the BC Human Rights Code, but also to educate folks about their responsibilities under the code. And I think, people may not be as aware of their responsibilities as they are of their rights. So if, you're a server in a cafe, you have a responsibility to uphold people's human rights to access your service. So I think that's such an important point that you make. Thank you. I want to just really quickly take a moment to talk a little bit about another resource that's attached to the video. We have created some conversation guides that accompany this video in case anyone wants to think more deeply about Georgia's story and maybe engage in some conversation about it. These discussion guides are really great for teachers in classrooms across BC, but they're also wonderful for community groups and even just for conversations amongst family and friends. You can find the discussion guides on our website, and I really think these videos and the discussion guides are really important, and we really hope that they're going to encourage dialogue about human rights and accessibility in our province.
Thanks, Martha. Just so people know, they can go to bchumanrights.ca/love
Thanks, Michelle.
to find those resources. And okay, so we have a few frequently asked questions that we'd like to answer live. Martha and Georgia, perhaps we can take turns answering these, whichever one you feel most comfortable with answering, of course. The first question is, do businesses have to see certification before allowing entry to a person who uses a guide dog or a service dog?
Do you want to take that one, Martha, or do you want me to go?
Sure. Would you like to get us started, and maybe I can jump in at some point too?
For sure.
Yeah.
So the short answer is no. The main identifiers for a guide dog are their harness, and so it's a handle. So basically, the goal of a guide dog is to pull their owner, and so they need a handle to hold on to. So that's the main identifier of a guide dog, and certification is a voluntary process, and guide dog users may have a card and they may not. And the process of being asked for identification is really degrading for many guide dog users, because it really it undermines the work that has gone into the partnership. So it's like I'm walking around with Maggie and we're doing our thing and going about our lives. And then if I enter into a place and I get asked, it's like, prove to me with some random piece of paper that you have some credentials. And it's very degrading and othering. So the answer is no.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that people understand that there is no requirement to ask for certification. I think I have heard from service providers like servers in restaurants that there's some sort of mistaken idea that they're required to ask for certification, and they really aren't. And you're absolutely correct. It singles out people who use guide dogs and service dogs in ways that can be really distressing and feel really dehumanizing. So you're right. Because it's voluntary, it's a purely voluntary system. Some guide dog users might have some kind of certification and others will not. So it's important for people to realize too that it's not legal to refuse service to a person who uses a guide dog or service dog simply because they don't have some sort of certification documentation.
That's a really good point.
That's right. Thank you both. The second question, I think, is one that needs to be understood more broadly. What is the difference between a pet dog and a guide dog or service dog? And I can take this one on first, if you don't mind, because I kind of touched on it earlier. They are definitely not the same. My pet dogs only provide companionship. They don't have any specialized training related to a disability. Guide dogs are very well trained, very well behaved, and as Georgia said, they often wear special harnesses with a body piece and a handle that they can be identified with. And they help people with disabilities with daily tasks like going to the grocery store, getting to work safely, and essentially be more independent. There is a nuance between guide dogs and service dogs as well. So guide dogs typically help people who are blind and have visual impairments. And service dogs help people with other kinds of disabilities, including hearing impairments, epilepsy, diabetes, and more. Yeah. Does anyone want to add
I
to that?
totally, like, you nailed it on the head. I think, so in order to get, Maggie is my second guide dog, and in order to get her, I traveled to New Jersey, where the school is that she comes from, and we trained together for 2.5 weeks. And before that, her training, she took 4 months to learn how to be a guide dog. So it's a very specialized type of dog that, she keeps me from getting run over. She keeps me from falling off curbs. So you have to, it's a, yeah, it's a very well and specifically trained dog.
Definitely. Mine gets me run over. So.
Yeah, exhibit A.
Yeah. Okay, this next question is a little more nuanced and one that people tend to worry over. What if, say, other customers, like in a restaurant, have a dog allergy or are scared of dogs?
I think it's so important that no disability trumps another. So they're having a severe dog allergy is not any more important than being visually impaired, and vice versa. So it's really important to work together. If it's a small area, work out, okay, who's going to sit where, or maybe we can go we can stagger the times that we want to access this service. And guide dogs as handlers, we're trained to groom our dogs very regularly, and so they don't they don't leave a lot behind when they are out and about. That's a requirement of our schools, is to keep them neat and tidy. So it's important to know that they're meant to be hidden when they're in places, and so you often don't know that they're there.
I think that's a really great point, that they're so well trained. They stay with their handlers. You're right that you might not even notice that they're there. They stay on the floor near their handlers. They're so well trained. They're not aggressive. And I really liked your point, Georgia, about having service providers maybe think of a plan before a situation like that would occur, to think about, how could we problem solve someone with perhaps an allergy and a guide dog user being in our restaurant at the same time. How could we do that? So to try and problem solve in advance of those things happening and have a plan, I think is a really great idea.
And I think I was just thinking back to the fear aspect. Guide dogs, they don't interact with anyone else except for their handler. So there's there's just no way that a guide dog would ever get near somebody who's afraid of them, period, because they're doing a job, they're guiding people. And when they're at a table, they're sitting under their handler's chair. So there's no need to be afraid of them.
Thanks, Georgia. I think that adds a lot of clarity for folks. Oh no, can anyone? Oh, I just lost connection for a bit, but I'm back. Okay. All right. So to our last question. This one is for you, Georgia. Georgia, in your own experience, what was the process for getting a guide dog? Did you come across any challenges from that?
It's a very intense experience. So, getting a guide dog, there's many different schools that provide them. And so it's all about doing your research in terms of what you want from a dog and what you might, just basic things in terms of training. And so when I got my first guide dog, I went with a school in New Jersey, which is called the CNI, and it's the oldest guide dog school in the world. And I went there for 3.5 weeks where I trained with my first dog, Granger, and he changed my life. Where I before I got him, I was using a cane and finding it very difficult and clunky and always sort of bracing to hit things. And then as soon as I got Granger, it was like a 180 where it was like a smooth ride and I was gliding down the street and I just had this new sense of freedom. And I would say that the whole experience was, it's exhausting because you're learning to trust this new little animal that's going to keep you safe. And they took us into New York, which is, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. And it was a very incredible experience. And, you're learning to live with another animal. So you have to figure out, okay, what's your wake up schedule? What's my wake up schedule? You want to eat that? I don't think so. So it's very, it's learning to share your life and adjusting to getting Maggie, my second seeing eye dog. They're Granger and Maggie are two very different animals, and they both have done great jobs and just opened up my world immensely. So I would say the whole experience of getting a guide dog has been incredible and taught me so much. And the positives definitely outweigh the early morning wake up calls to be fed at 4 a.m.
Thanks, Georgia. That was a very fulsome answer, very insightful. Thank you for that. Okay, that's all the time we have for questions. Martha, I think I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Michelle. And thank you, Georgia, for giving us that insight into the getting a guide dog and training a guide dog. It's pretty incredible. I want to just mention as well some of our office's work on creating resources to raise awareness amongst taxi drivers and servers in the restaurant industry about the discrimination faced by guide dog users in those industries. The resources that we've created include printable posters and stickers and infographics for taxi drivers and servers to learn about their human rights responsibilities. If you'd like to check them out, you can visit our website at bchumanrights.ca/guide dogs. And before we wrap up, I want to invite you to share your thoughts on our event today. We'll have a short evaluation that I think we'll be putting in the chat after we're finished today. And we'd really appreciate your feedback. We'd love to know how we can improve our lunch sessions. So we'd love to hear from you. And I also want to take a moment to thank everybody that has helped to create this video and the resources. And of course, first and foremost, I want to thank you, Georgia, for participating in the video and being here with us for today's launch. We appreciate you, and we appreciate you sharing your story with us. I'd also like to send a deep thank you to the BC Coalition for Guide Dog Users and the BC Federation of the Blind for advising our office on the guide dog resources for taxi drivers and servers. And I'd like to thank our team behind the scenes making this launch possible today. Thank you so much. And just a quick reminder for everyone watching that if you'd like to see George's video again, or if you'd like to watch the other videos in our I Love My Human Rights video series, you can go to our website at bchumanrights.ca @maggie_love and find them all there. One last but not least important resource, Georgia. I hear that your guide dog Maggie has an Instagram account.
She's really good at typing, surprisingly. Also,
she's famous.
Very talented. Yeah, I started. It was initially a Facebook page and now has migrated to Instagram and Facebook, and it's called Maggie the Seeing Eye Dog. I started it just as a way of sharing my experiences because while they are some of them are amazing and incredible, they are also challenging, and so I needed a platform to share those. So yeah, it's Maggie the Seeing Eye Dog.
That's wonderful. I'd encourage anyone to follow Maggie. I do, and she's wonderful. Lastly, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, for being part of this launch and watching our video with us. Thank you, and I think that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.